Hello YouTube, it's Jay. So we're going to do a 9-ball break number 5 today. If you haven't watched the earlier ones, please go back and watch them. Today we're going to do the break that's probably the most well-known break on the Pro Tour. I did a thing way back when talking about the mechanics of this break, or breaking in general, using this break as the example. However, today we're going to tear it apart in depth. I'm talking about the side break. I'm talking about the power break. Now, this break has been around forever. If you go back and watch videos of Buddy Hall and Mike Siegel and Earl Strickland playing 9 and 10 ball back in the 80s, this is the break they were using. Now, 40 years later, this is still one of the most prevalent breaks. Now, it did change a little bit. It's more likely to have the similar break that's the soft break that I did back in video number 1 because of the advent of the templates. So before the templates, your break was about getting the most motion out of the balls and controlling the cue ball at the same time. When the templates came around, now you could predict where balls would go. So now with the templates, it's a softer break, more about controlling, more about making the ball and controlling, making the wing and controlling the cue ball to have a shot on the one. Back in the day though, breaks weren't really that predictable until the Sardo showed up in 2001. Every break was interesting. Every break was different. There was no such thing as a totally frozen rack, even on tournament tables. There were always gaps. And so for when you watch those old tournaments, you'll see the pros go up to the rack and do this. And what they're doing is they're shading the light so that they can see if there are gaps in the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 9. Now I'm referring to those positions. I'm using the balls in order so that I can refer to them by number. So they would look for the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 9 to be frozen. And as long as those 4 balls are frozen, the rest of it, we just didn't care. I mean, we did care, but the spread of the rack was really dependent on those 4 balls. So that's your condition for this break. Now, I'm going to be breaking off of a template because I want to make sure the balls are frozen so you can see what the cue ball does when it's done properly. Typically though, if you're on the template, like I said, you use break number 1 where you hit into the 1 and you bank the 1 off there over here, and the cue ball comes off and drifts down this way, or it goes over to the rail and drifts out this way so that you always have a shot on the 1. If you're not using a template though, this is a great break. This is still the break that you will see the most in tournaments where they use a wooden or triangle rack. Again, if it's a template, you have better control, you're better off with the first break. Okay, so how does this break work? So this break is perfect for teaching the mechanics of the break. And when I say the mechanics, what I mean is the technique of the break, the important parts of the break. So this one's going to be a little bit longer than most because I'm going to talk through every piece of the break and every component to the break. So this is the most technical break of all of them. And what I mean by that is that it is the most susceptible to variations in how you break. So if you do not break the same way every time, same speed, same stroke, same motion with the cue, you're going to get different results. Okay, so you have to have all of it put together to be able to do this break consistently. Now, I do see a lot of players in pool halls that use this break. However, when I look at them and watch them break, their technique is off. There are pieces of this where technique is extremely important. Okay, so let's talk about this all the way from front to end. So let's start with the basic break. So the basic break is You hit the cue ball with about a tip of top English. You may have to vary that depending on your stroke, but one of the other factors in this break is that we're using top English. Now, why are we using top English on this? Why don't we just hit it below center and stun the cue ball and just kind of try to have it bounce and stop here? Well, the reason for that is that you will find over time that the same speed break with top English produces more action among the object balls than draw does. If you draw, it takes a harder hit to get the same motion. In fact, Mike Siegel even talks about that in his Perfect Straight Pool video. When he talks about breaking, he talks about how when you use bottom, you have to hit it harder to get the same action out of everything. And he's right about that. So with top English, it tends to do more damage to the rack, meaning the object balls tend to travel more. So you want to hit this with top. You don't want to adjust use bottom English on this. Very hard to control draw to begin with, and with this much power behind the break, it becomes virtually impossible to get good control. If you're going to put draw, use the first break I did, the one that's the medium speed break with draw. And again, out of the template, that's the right choice. So anyhow, let's go ahead and do our 10 breaks. The idea is that you're going to drive down into the cue ball. The cue ball is going to come slightly off the felt. It's going to drive down, it's going to hit the one, and it's either going to, on the table, come out and then the forward spin stops it somewhere near the middle of the table, or it's going to hit slightly before hit back, come up, bounce, and then come forward to the center of the table. Those are the two ways this happens. Now, I have not practiced this break in a very long time. I do not expect to see the second of those happen. I expect to see the cue ball hit the one, slide back, and then stop forward with the English. Now, when we do this, I am going to have the second camera going so that you can see what it looks like from above, so that you can see the action on the cue ball. We'll slow it down so you can see it actually do what it's supposed to do. Okay, so let's talk about how we do this. So tip of English, you're going to try to hit the one ball as square as possible, just slightly to the left of center. So instead of hitting square into it, you're going to hit slightly over, which is why it comes off at this little angle, okay? So you have to hit slightly to the left of center. The initial aiming point is to aim straight at the one, and you see the cue ball come back this way, and then spin forward this way, and you're on the center of the one. Now, once you have found your aiming point for the center, you're going to move to the very next aiming point to the left, in this case. So for me, I break from the right side of the table, so I have to hit a little bit to the left so that the cue ball will come straight up and out. If I hit too much left, it runs over to that rail and out. Which is okay. If I hit too much to the right, it typically comes out and just spins down here, which is bad. You really need, the idea is to make a ball and put the cue ball in the center of the table so you have the highest percentage of a follow-on shot. Now, pros to this break. This break is beyond any doubt the easiest way to meet the three-point rule, getting three balls across the head string. It has a very high chance of pocketing the wing ball for the 5, and it has a chance of pocketing the 1 to the side. Sometimes, if you get it really good, the 3 will come cross-side, or the 2 will come cross-side, and occasionally you'll get the 6 will come out and end up down here, or the 7 will come off the rail and over here. This break pockets more balls than any break any other break that I do. It more consistently has multiple balls fall in. In fact, when we do our 10 racks, we're going to track that statistic as well. So we're going to add that as a category. How many times out of the 10 breaks did we pocket more than one ball? Okay. With this break, so first of all, we need to get all of our directional force in a straight line behind the cue ball. Okay? That's one of the technique things I mentioned that I see people do wrong is they try to put backhand English on, or they get backhand English on this break. They push it out like this. You have to have absolutely straight momentum into the ball, into the rack to execute this properly. Okay. Now that means that everything has to be lined up. Okay. So when you're breaking this, everything has to be in a straight line. So if I'm breaking towards the camera for the sake of showing it, I need my right foot, my rear foot, my hand, my elbow should all be in a straight line. So my elbow and my hand at the center of my stroke should be directly over my rear foot. Okay? When I do this, I want to push straight forward with my body. Okay? I'm going to do that all in one motion. What I'm trying to do is make sure that at the time that I impact the cue ball, I want my entire body pushing, going through it. And if I'm going to kick my leg, which you'll see some people do, and which I do on a hard break, and I'll show you what that looks like. If you're going to kick your foot has to come straight up behind you so that that extra momentum is being driven all down that straight line towards the break. That's how you get those big, powerful breaks. So everything in a straight line starts with your stance. Starts with your stance. Now, when we hit this, we're hitting above center, and we're going to be, because we've got the rail here, we've got a little bit of elevation of the rear of the cue. So you don't want your cue actually on the rail, you want it at an angle. Okay, and you want to hit above center. Now, when we hit, we're going to drive the cue through and down, and you should see the cue flex. Okay, if the cue doesn't flex like this, you're not doing it right. And in fact, you'll see I have lines on the table that come out about 8 inches in an absolutely straight line here. So from here to here, they come out in a straight line, and then I start to pick my cue up, and they veer off almost universally to the left and then back to the right by the time I get my cue off the table. You need to have that straight stroke, and when you go through it, your cue should bend. And if your cue doesn't bend, you're not doing this right. Bottom line. Okay, so we get everything in a straight line. We're hitting the cue down into the table. We're getting the cue ball to elevate, not this much, just barely off the table, and hit, slide back, and stop. Okay? We're going to make the wing ball. We will sometimes make a 1 here, sometimes we'll make a 3 over there. We will make sometimes a 6 and sometimes the 7 will go down in that corner pocket. The 4 should almost always go in that corner pocket from this side. Okay, so let's talk about side to break though. So I'm right-handed. So I want to break from the right side of the table. And the reason for that is as I'm stepping through my break, I don't want to hit my leg against the table. It's that easy. Even if you don't hit your leg against the table, you still see it out of the corner of your eye and you adjust for it. So if you're right-handed, you break from the right side. If you're left-handed, you break from the left. Now that doesn't mean that as a right-hander, I can't come over here if the right side's not working. I can certainly come over here. But I'll show you here in a minute that when I break from the right, because I'm right-handed, that means that my hand is coming into the table, and as I'm coming forward, I stand a chance of, or I don't hit the table, but I see the table and I make adjustments to my body movement to keep from hitting the table. I don't have to, and you have to train those away. You don't have to do that. You're not going to hit the table if you do it right. I have hit my hand against the edge of the pool table on occasion when I had more of a straight angle. Maybe I was out a little further. I have hit my hand against that. That hurts. Don't do it. Stay close to the rail so that you don't hit that. And because we're pushing down, I mean, there's very little chance of that happening if you do it right. So, because you're pushing down, your hand's up above the table. So you really shouldn't hit that. If you hit that, something's wrong with your technique. All right, so let's take a look at what that break looks like executed properly. Now, again, I have not practiced this in a long time. When I was doing my thing on the tour, I had several times where Bustamante and I would discuss breaks. At the 2001 US Open, when his break wasn't working and mine was, he came over and asked me how I was breaking, and I shared it with him. And in return, sometimes when my break wasn't working and his was, he and I would, he would tell me, I would ask him, hey, how are you breaking today? And he'd tell me. He probably doesn't remember me, but we didn't have like that close personal relationship. I think it was more just about he looked at which of the hard breakers were doing well, and I tended to be one of the ones that was. So, and I obviously am always happy to get advice from Francisco Bustamante on how to break, because he is one of the best breakers ever in the game of 9-ball. Very well known for it. One of the fastest breaks. By the way, I should mention that. What you're trying to do with this break to get the power and the big pop is to move the cue as quickly as you possibly can. And so what that means is finding the right weight for your body to be able to move the cue as quickly as possible. If the cue's too light, you really don't get any momentum behind it. If the cue's too heavy, your arm will tire out because you're pushing more mass than you need to push. Remember, pool, especially at the high level tournament level, it has a big endurance component, okay? And so you don't want, there are players that use 25, 27 ounce cues. In fact, the APA, I believe, limited it to 23 because there were so many people getting heavy cues. And that's fine if you're just going to play, a race to 5 and you're done for the night. But let me tell you, when you're in a 4, 5, 6, 7, 9-day tournament, Derby City Classic is a 9-day tournament, and you're going to play dozens of races, which means hundreds of racks. By the end of that, you're getting tired. Let me tell you what, your feet are getting tired. Your legs are aching by that last day. Your arm and shoulder and your pecs are they're sore. And all of that contributes to loss of focus. You see people get to the highest levels of the game. There was one that was really famous between Earl Strickland and Jeremy Jones, and it was the final 4 of, I can't remember what tournament it was, but they were playing in the semifinal round on the bottom end of the bracket. So they had lost a game already, so they went through the long side of the bracket, and they got on and started playing, and nobody could believe how many missed shots there were. Well, let me tell you what, that comes down to focus. You have to be able to focus, and especially that long into a tournament, I think they had 247 players or something that these guys had made their way through over multiple days. You come in, you're cold, your muscles are aching, you're not warmed up. You have, I think it's 10 minutes to warm up before those matches. Of course, you can always go to the, sometimes there's a money room and sometimes there's a practice room. You can go to those rooms and warm up in there. But regardless, by the end of that tournament, you're so sore. You're so incredibly sore. And so that contributes to loss of focus. You think about, oh, my arm, my neck, my back, my feet. And you have to be able to push that aside. And that's actually a big part of the game. And that's why a lot of these players, in addition to the obvious health benefits, that's a contributing factor to why some of these players are going out and working out in the gym every day. And Earl Strickland, even at I think he's about 50 now, 51, 52. Even Earl still runs 4, 5, 6 miles a day. Even during the tournament, he'll run that in the morning just to loosen up his muscles. So anyhow, endurance is a factor. So a lighter cue, one that's at the very bottom of, if you're hitting, start all the way with the lightest cue you can find. It'll feel light, you won't get a great break with it. Start going up weight just until you get heavy enough that you're feeling some substance behind your break. And you'll find it will break really well if you do that. And you keep working up, find the right weight for you. It's not always the same. Players that don't have good technique will often use heavier cues to make up for the lack of technique. And that's not a bad choice until you get to the point where you do have good technique. Okay, so let's look at a few of these breaks. All right, so that was me breaking from the right side of the table. That's my normal break spot. You can see I have a huge number of marks there. I've got all kinds of landing marks leading up to the one ball. Those are burn marks where the cue ball has left the table and come back down and hit. So that's my normal break. So that's my power break. You saw I did pretty darn well with it. Now, on the right side of the table, here's what it looks like. Now you can see that on the right side of the table, I don't get as good a break. And that's not due to the table, that's why I'm using the magic practice so that it's not due to gaps in the balls or anything like that. The reason I'm getting less power on the right side is just simply that having the table in my vision where it is causes me to subconsciously pull my strokes so I don't injure myself. I'm not going to injure myself if I practice. If I put some more practice time in, if I break more from that right or from that left side, I will naturally overcome that, and then I'll get to where I'm breaking the same on the left as I am on the right. It's just lack of practice that I'm not getting as good a break on this side. It's also one thing to remember is that just because, so my aiming point from there is right here, the 7 and 5. So visually when I'm looking at track, I'm aiming in here, which is slightly to the left of center on the 1. Just because that's my aiming point from the right side does not mean that my aiming point on this side, on the left side, is the opposite point between 4 and 6. If you have small variations in your stroke, you may end up hitting this differently on the two sides. Now, ideally, if your stroke was exactly perfectly straight and you didn't have the subconscious influence and you practiced it, in theory, you should be able to aim at the same point on either side. But the reality of it is that eye dominance plays into that, left eye dominant versus right eye dominant. And so quite often, the aiming point from the two sides is slightly different. You have to find yours. It goes along with your stroke. Now, again, over here, just like on the other side, trying to be your full mass and all the motion going through. If you're kicking your leg, you need to kick your leg so that it is in motion when the cue ball is struck. Everything needs, the key to that real power is everything moving towards the rack in a straight line at the time you strike the cue ball. That's the timing element of this. Okay, and if you can do that, you'll get true power in your breaks. It's a practice break. You have to put the time in on this one to get it right. Okay, so that is today's break. We're going to take a look at the aiming points. They are exactly the same as they were for shot number one. The difference being that you're going to start out aiming for the center of the one ball. That's the only difference between this and shot number one as far as aiming points. Your English is one tip above cue ball. You are driving your cue down into the table to get that nice bend. That will help generate the hop that you need, and it will also help to generate the amount of spin that you need to have it park. And by the way, that's what it's called when the cue ball. So when you hear somebody talk about parking the cue ball, what they mean is the cue ball moves and then it just stops or maybe rolls a couple inches forward. Parking the cue ball is not hitting this with stun and having the cue ball just sit there. Parking the cue ball very specifically means you hit the rack, the cue ball bounces back, and then top spin stops it in the center of the table. That's called parking the cue ball. If you hear it referred to as parking the cue ball with anything other than top English, it's not. All right, so let's do our 10 breaks. The categories we'll have for these breaks are bad breaks, meaning that we scratch, we don't have a shot on the one or the next ball, because the one will sometimes fall, so it would be the 2 ball or maybe even the 3 ball. That's our next ball. But whatever the next ball is, we need to have a shot on it, we need to make a ball. If we don't do that, it's a bad break. If it's a good break, remember we have the category of we broke, we pocketed the ball, we stopped the cue like we wanted to, but we don't get a shot. Now that is one of the cons of this break. That is a big con of this break. Because, and it's why when there's a template you don't use this, is because the cue ball will tend on this break to come down here by the rail, okay? It will tend to come by the rail. And if you park the cue ball in the center of the table and the one's on the end of the rail, well, you don't really have a great shot. Yes, you can get hit, yes, you can play it safe, but you don't have a great shot. One of the other, So let's go ahead and do our 10 breaks. We're going to categorize them as a successful break is a break where we pocket a ball and we have a shot on the next ball. That will be more likely if I'm able to successfully park the cue. If I don't park the cue, I might get lucky, but it will be it will happen more often when I park the cue. So if it doesn't make a ball, or so if it makes a ball and I have a shot to make the next ball on the table, then that's a successful break. And a partially successful break is one where I pocket a ball, I'm still at the table, but I don't have a good shot to make the ball after the break. I can hit it, I can play safe, but I probably am not going to try to shoot it to make it. A failed break will be a break in which I either don't pocket a ball, which is highly unlikely coming out of the template rack. I'm going to probably make that 4-ball just about every time, if not every time. But I don't make a ball, or I don't have a hit on the object ball without a bank, a masse, or a jump shot. In other words, if I can't see enough of the ball to play a good safe directly, then it is a failed break. Okay, we're also going to track how many of these breaks have more than one ball go in. We expect the 4-ball to go in every time because this is a template, and it does. What we want to track in addition to that is how many times do we get more than one ball. And I'll tell you, on this break, this is the break that I've made the most balls on most of the time. I tend to make, I always make 1. I tend to make 2. Sometimes I get 3 and 4, and I've made as many as 6 balls on the break with this break. So this is the break for counting multiple balls, and we will do that throughout these 10. All right, so let's go ahead and do our 10 breaks. All right, so you can see that this is a very successful break. The biggest challenge with it is the position after the break. This break, it's very easy to make balls. If you get it right, you'll make balls every time, or just about every time. Even on a triangle rack, you'll still tend to make balls. The challenge with this one is that that shot after the break is almost purely luck. I mean, we know that the 1-ball is going to come down here. If we hit it hard enough, it bounces out here, and then we've got a good shot. If we hit it softer, it comes off this rail, and it rolls out here. The funny thing about this is that the average player, let me rephrase that. Most players, including the pros, are going to end up with a 1 somewhere down by this rail. And parking the cue ball in the center of the table means that you're kind of playing safe after that, unless you happen to get an angle. And there is the smallest variance left or right on your hit on the 1 makes all the difference in the world on whether you have that shot or not. and it's too small a difference to be able to accurately paint it. It is, you're probably talking a 64th of an inch variance to one side or the other is the difference between you seeing the one and not seeing the one. So, anyhow, that's break number 5. Hope you learned something. If you have questions, put them down in the comments. As always, if you like the video, hit like, hit subscribe, ding the notification bell, and we will see you next time.